Greetings, salutations, everybody. Welcome to AMC Mail Bag, the Mail Bag spinoff, if you will, of AMC Movie Talk. You know, we get a lot of emails from you guys every week, over 1,000 of them. And we only have time to answer like 2 of them on AMC Movie Talk Monday through Friday. So we started this new show on the weekends called AMC Mail Bag to do nothing but take your mailbag questions. Joining me for this fun festivities of film, he is the director of the upcoming documentary, The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, Mr. John Schnepp. John, how you doing?
Hey, great to be here.
Good to have you. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. And we'll start off with question number 1. And question number 1 comes to us from Dave Kiely, who writes, "Hey guys, love the show. Keep up the great work. So, with the latest rumor that Star Wars Episode 7 is being pushed to a December 2015 release, I think it takes it out of contention for highest grossing film of 2015. But do you think it will now be the highest grossing film for 2016? What are your thoughts?" Well, first of all, let's keep in perspective here that this is indeed a rumor that they may push it. I believe they're still shooting for a summer 2015 release, but J.J. Abrams is notoriously late. He's notoriously slow for getting his projects moving quickly enough for the studios. So, I mean, there could be some validity to it being moved to later December 2015. Now, if it does, any box office it makes, if it opens in 2015, any box office it makes is counted towards 2015. So that's just the way it works. So no, it won't become the biggest box office hit of 2016 because it'll still be considered a 2015 film if it opens in 2015, no matter what date. As far as it being taken out of contention, well, we'll get Schnepp's thoughts here in a second, but you know, I still believe Batman vs. Superman, if it's done right, will be the biggest box office hit, and I believe Avengers will be number 2. But if it moves to December, let's not just assume that it's no longer in contention. I mean, there are these little films you may have heard of called Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit that got released around Christmas time, and they've seemed to do quite well. Very, very well indeed. Now, on top of that, let's not forget that, hey, maybe moving it out of the summer takes it out of that big, fickle hodgepodge of all that heavy-duty, heavy-hitting competition that is in that summer. So it might even do better in December. Like I said, I still believe, although there could be validity to this December thing, I still believe it'll open in summer 2015. But if for whatever reason it does open in December, still counts towards 2015, and I still think it'll do just fine. Thank you very much. Schnepp, how do you see it?
Well, if it isn't an official announcement by Disney that it's been pushed to December 2015, I still think it's coming out in May 2015, and I still think it's going to be the biggest box office of that year. I think it'll be the number 1 film, and probably Avengers 2 will be the number 2, and Batman Superman will be number 3. Or, you know, I could swap both those out, but I think the Star Wars Episode 7 is going to be the number 1 box office film of 2015 if it's done right. So,
right.
You know, there's all these ifs and conjecture, but I think, you know, May is probably the month that they're going to open it. They've opened all the original Star Wars. 1977 came out in May. I think they want to echo that. So, no, a Star Wars movie has never opened in December. So, I think it's just weird. It would be weird. So.
All right.
Unless they're showing the Star Wars Christmas holiday special, where they go to the
Wookiee
planet. Yeah. Unless they've got that ace up their sleeve. Lucas really wanted to remake this, and he gave JJ the keys to the. Now they're going to Kaishak or whatever to celebrate
Life Day with the Wookiees. Okay,
yep.
Let's go to the next question before we get into the Christmas stuff on Star Wars. All right, the next question comes to us from Lee Arnold, who writes, "John keeps on saying remakes don't affect anyone, but there isn't an infinite amount of money in the movie world. A remake movie means that you are probably losing an original story movie or an independent film or a few that don't get picked up and don't receive the financial advertising push and so on and gets lost, but for a few people." Well, Lee, that's not really true. Now, to understand where he's come from, John always says remakes are fine. I believe remakes are totally fine. I have no problem with a remake of any kind. Why? Because there's no downside to a remake. You remake a film and it's good, like Scarface was a remake, and it's great. The Fly was a remake, and it's great. John Carpenter's The Thing was a remake, and it's great. The Departed was a remake of Infernal Affairs, and it won Best Picture. I mean, you go on. Lord of the Rings, you can make an argument, was a remake of the cartoon films. Right. I mean, you can go on and on and on. But if the remake sucks, who cares? I still have the original. It doesn't matter. You may hate the new Fright Night, but guess what? You still have your DVD of the original Fright Night, and it hasn't affected it at all. The DVD of the original Fright Night didn't suddenly become corrupt and unwatchable when they did a remake of it, right? So that's all fine and good. It doesn't really matter. And as a matter of fact, I made this point before, so many of my friends had never even heard of Infernal Affairs. They never even heard of Infernal Affairs before The Departed came out. And once they saw The Departed, then they went, oh, I want to check out the original. And they never would have originally. The Ring is another great example. Nobody in this culture saw the original Japanese version of The Ring until The Ring came out in North America. And then a lot of people got curious and checked it out for the first time. So guess what? A remake can even help an original film and expose it to people who never would have seen it before. Now, you do raise an interesting point when you say, there's only so much money to go around, and if you make a big remake, like if you do a big, Indiana Jones remake, okay, you do that, then that comes at the expense of a lot of these other films. But here's the question. Where do you think the studios get the money for these smaller independent films? Where do you think they get the money for more of these original films? Why do you think Disney can roll the dice now and start putting out some new experimental Pixar films? The reason? Because Avengers made almost $2 billion worldwide. The reason? Because Up made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Because Monsters University, a sequel, made so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. It are these films that fill the coffers of the studios so that they can go ahead. It's SpiderMan that allows Sony to fund Sony Pictures Classics to make independent films. I mean, the reality is that's where the money's got to come from. So I understand what you're saying when you say there's only so much money. If you make a remake, that's taking away money from over here. But my argument is it is the money that these remakes and these sequels, the big blockbusters that these films make, that allows studios to fund these other smaller films that probably won't make a lot of money for the studio. So that's how I see it. Schnepp, you've been a storyteller and a filmmaker for a long time. How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you just said. I mean, it's bigger movies that help fund the smaller movies, but there really is an infinite amount of money. And there has been and there always will be, because for a big studio that's like, we're not going to take any more chances of making smaller films, we're just going to stick to our sequels, another studio is going to open up and say, we'll fill that void. We'll get money from these banks, these different investors. We'll make those films. That's how it's always been. In the 70s, large studios were like, no one's going to see our movies. Maybe we'll, instead of spending $5 million, we'll give these smaller films $500,000 each, and now we got 10 movies. Or so it happens all the time. It's up and down, but the money is always there. I mean, they throw more money at bigger films, especially like look at Lone Ranger. It was like $250 million with ads and stuff. They lost a lot of money in that, but they're gonna get it back in their other like 6 or 7 releases. So it's not, it's an ad loss, gain kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think the studios understand that void you're talking about, because almost every studio now has one, if not 2, if not 3 little sub-studios that focus on the smaller films and focus on independent films. And, the money comes down. And so the money's there. And, the more big blockbusters become big success, guess what? That funds more of the smaller films. That's why we have like 500 movies now that get released every year, as opposed to like 200 movies that got released a couple of decades ago, because there's a lot of money.
And honestly, I was going to say the digital revolution has made it a lot easier for smaller theaters to show more movies. So, there might be the blockbuster film at the 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, but then they show an independent film at 11 and maybe 12, or they show independent smaller films are in the afternoons on Saturdays and Sundays, or they fill the void. So it actually has opened up a lot more flexibility for films to be screened via digital. So,
all right. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question comes to us from, let's see, did we do this one already? No, we didn't. Here we go. Mark writes, hey guys, really enjoy the show. I just wanted to see if you saw the rumors that Christopher Nolan has dropped out of the Man of Steel sequel. Obviously, this has not been confirmed by Warner Brothers or Nolan himself. So my first question is, do you think there's any truth to this rumor? Secondly, If in some world it ends up being true, how much trouble would Man of Steel 2 be in if Nolan isn't involved in some capacity? Schnepp, have you heard this rumor? And let's assume for a second it's true. Let's just go on that wild assumption for a second. Mm-hmm. If it's true, what kind of effect do you think this has?
None. And I don't think it has any effect. Christopher Nolan was involved I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis, and I wasn't listening in on phone calls or anything, but I mean, he really was like doing his own movie. He was doing Dark Knight. Superman was being shot and made while Dark Knight was finishing being made and edited. So, I mean, remember, Man of Steel was supposed to come out the year before, and they pushed it an entire year. I mean, it was supposed to come out on the heels of The Dark Knight Rises, and they were like, look, we're going to push it to next summer. So that's what happened. So he was on set maybe a couple of times. He wasn't really that involved in the shooting or the editing. I mean, he had like kind of the Godfathering type thing where he like, hey, I'll put it together. I'll put the team together. Like a very, that's the kind of the producer he was. So that he's not going to be involved or is going to be involved, I don't think it's going to affect Man of Steel at all. That's my opinion. And like I said, I wasn't there on the set. I wasn't, but I've seen all the pictures, and Nolan's on set in 2 photos. So,
And Nolan himself said he really wasn't that involved. I mean,
right.
You got to remember, the Man of Steel got started because Nolan and David Goyer hit a roadblock in writing the script for Dark Knight Rises, and so they decided to take a 2-week break. And during that 2-week, David Goyer, the writer, started reading a whole bunch of Superman comics, and then he came up with the idea for the Man of Steel film, and he drafted out this outline, and then Christopher Nolan and him came back, and Christopher Nolan said, did you fix the Batman Rises problem? And Goyer said, nope, but I wrote this here Superman movie. And Nolan loved it, and they got on the phone, and they called the head of Warner Brothers, and boom, now we've got Man of Steel and a revitalized DC universe. Then they got Zack Snyder involved, and really, other than that, it wasn't Christopher Nolan's movie. So him not being, he had no veto power over anybody once the movie started getting made. It was Zack Snyder's movie. It was David Goyer's movie. And Christopher Nolan has emphasized that a number of times. And so him not, look, would it be good if he was there? Yeah, obviously when you got a filmmaker of the talent level of a Christopher Nolan, it's always good to have him around. And if he's not, it's really not that big of a deal because he wasn't that involved in the first one. So I think they'll be just fine with or without him. And once again, we don't know that Christopher Nolan isn't going to be involved at all. He still may be involved on a very limited level as a producer or whatever. But if he's not, I don't think it's a big deal.
Plus, I think he's still going to have his name on there. It's like it only helps Warner Brothers and himself. He's going to get a deep, big, fat check, and they're able to say, from the producer of Dark Knight and Man of Steel, just slap his name on. Nolanites will be like, he's involved, and then it helps. So I'm sure he's not going to give up that giant paycheck
for doing nothing.
Really. So I mean, he already did his job. He's like, hey, I'm the producer on all the other Superman movies, whatever. And they're like, okay. So he did his job. He gets the credit. So.
All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from Brian Hultgren. Hope I'm saying your name right, Brian. And Brian Hultgren writes, hey guys, love the show. One topic you discussed on the show some time ago was if Warner Brothers will reboot Green Lantern for a Justice League movie or not. I think they should, and recast someone else as Hal Jordan, but I still think they should keep Mark Strong from the 2011 film as Sinestro. He did a really good job with the role, and I still think he has so much to offer for the character, what we didn't see in the movie. Do you think he can still play Sinestro, or should Sinestro also be recast? Why or why not? Schnepp, let's start with you. Should they recast Sinestro if they reboot this film?
You know what? That's a tough question because it's like, you know what? I think Ryan Reynolds was fine as Green Lantern. I think the script was horrible and the way it was directed was horrible. But he was fine as Green Lantern. I didn't have a problem with him. And I thought Mark Strong was great as Sinestro. I would just keep the cast and just get a better writer, get a better director. I mean, it's really that simple. I mean, and I don't think they're going to reboot it anyway. I think they're, if they throw Green Lantern into Justice League, I would just keep Ryan Reynolds. That's what I would do. I mean, it's sort of like, I know they've recast the Hulk like 3 times in the Marvel universe, but I mean, DC, it's not that big of a deal, I don't think. I mean, I think Green Lantern and Ryan Reynolds were fine. The movie itself was horrible, but, I'm sure Ryan Reynolds would be able to do a great job given a better script and a better director.
Yeah, see, I didn't think Green Lantern was horrible, but even I, who try to be the eternal optimist, had to say it was disappointing.
Yeah.
That film had a lot of problems, but I've always said, like what you were just saying, Shep, I've never believed that one of those many problems was Ryan Reynolds. I thought Ryan Reynolds was a good Hal Jordan. I think that worked. Now, I do think they're going to reboot Green Lantern, but I hope you're right. I really don't think they should. I say Schnepp is completely right. Get a new writer, new director, rework this thing, keep Mark Strong as Sinestro, keep Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan, and then you don't have to worry about origin stories again. You can just move right into Justice League. I think there's a lot of upside to this. But I will say this. If you're going to reboot Green Lantern and recast a lead and retell an origin story and stuff like that, if you're going to do that, you have to wipe the slate clean. You don't get to pick some pieces to keep and some to get rid of. And that includes Mark Strong as Sinestro. I thought Mark Strong was a very good Sinestro. But if you're rebooting the series, then reboot it. You sweep away the other stuff and you bring in new stuff. You don't just keep the third tier actor from the original. And then the only time I've ever said that I have an exception to that rule, where if you're rebooting, sweep everything away. The only time I ever had an exception to that was J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man. I would be totally good if they brought J.K. Simmons back as J. Jonah Jameson in the new Spider-Man universe. But that is the only time I've ever said that. And I'm contradicting myself by doing it, but I'm letting myself get away with it. So, yeah, I mean, I hope Schnepp's right. I really do. I think what Schnepp is suggesting is the way to go, but I don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah, they could just do an outer space War of the Rings, or like use the Ring Wars or whatever. It's like he's the space police. That's what Green Lantern is.
Yep.
Take him off Earth, have him. They've got all those 3D characters already built. It's like half the money can be like saved by just doing that if they're worried about losing money. So,
all right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from Gerald, who writes, I understand that Disney does not own the film rights to Spider-Man or X-Men. But could Disney still produce cartoons or have Spidey appear with Mickey on the Disney Channel? Also, could either Spider-Man or Wolverine show up in a Pixar movie, like possibly Toy Story 4? Very good question. Yeah, what he's referring to here is, of course, Marvel and Disney do not own the movie rights to characters like the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, Spider-Man. That's why you're never going to see Wolverine and the Avengers on the big screen, or why we're not going to see a Civil War movie, for those of you who are familiar with the comic books, because they belong. But you will notice that in some Saturday morning cartoons produced by Disney, that Spider-Man is in cartoons with Avengers and with Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. So how does that all work? To the best of my knowledge, and Schnepp knows better than I do, but to the best of my knowledge, the way it works is this. Marvel and DC still have television animated rights to those characters. They can put Spider-Man in Avengers with Nick Fury, and they can have Guardians of the Galaxy show up and do all stuff with Spider-Man or whatever. They still can produce that kind of stuff. But what they can't do is walk into the movie universe. So I don't think you can have, for instance, an animated film like Toy Story and have Spider-Man show up. Now, I believe that say Sony, for an animated film like that, may go, okay, I go ahead, use Spider-Man as a little toy in the film. That's fine, because that doesn't affect their property of Spider-Man at all. So I believe that could happen, maybe. But other than that, no. You can see them in TV cartoons, not live action as far as I know. But you cannot see them in the movie universe, live action or animated. Schneps, what's your understanding of all this?
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. Let me answer the last part of it first. With the possibility of Wolverine or Spider-Man showing up in a Pixar movie like Toy Story 4, I think the best part, for me at least, of Toy Story was that aside from Mr. Potato Head, it was toys that didn't exist. It was new versions of toys. So it's kind of like Buzz Lightyear what didn't exist before Toy Story. So I like that aspect of not bringing in all these pre-made toys. There were a couple pre-made toys, but I like that most of them were like new versions of characters, so to speak. With that being said, I think Marvel Disney can, without any problem of copyright, have an action figure of Spider-Man in Toy Story 4 or Wolverine as well, or any of the Marvel characters, because it's not a movie version of them. It's still like it's an adaptation of an animated character turned into a toy. So there's a wiggle way through that, I'm sure legally, where they can have, yeah, I'm just the toy version of Spider-Man. There's like 10 different Spider-Mans with all the different outfits and stuff, you know. It's like a Spider-Man war with Toy Story. I mean, it's kind of, the variations are endless in that category. You also have the same thing with Lego. You know, all these different DC superheroes are showing up in Lego movies. I mean, it comes down to like the movie versions are the things that like Fox and Sony are never going to give the rights up. They're always going to have a Spider-Man or an X-Men or a Fantastic Four in some way, shape, or form. Let me look at like they bungled and lost Daredevil and Blade. I mean, just a couple months ago, they lost a whole bunch of characters. If they just had a character in the process of that being made into a movie, they could have kept those rights, but they didn't. So I think it's Marvel's gain to make a Daredevil movie, to make a new series of Blade. I think they should be making those now. I mean, I'm happy with the way they're rolling out their Phase 3, Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4. But of course, I'd love to see more. So, you know, that being said, I don't think there's a problem with Disney and Marvel making all their cartoon characters interact and have an actual animated world universe. That can happen. You can have Civil War animated on Disney XD if you wanted to.
All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from Anthony, and Anthony writes, there's been a lot of talk lately about Sony developing a possible Spider-Man cinematic universe. If this were to happen, what films other than Spider-Man do you think that could work? The only characters that come to mind are Venom and Black Cat spin-offs, and of course, the most talked about, Sinister Six. Do you think spin-offs could work, and for which characters? Spider-Man alone has so many magnificent stories to tell on his own, so I don't know if spin-offs are necessary to really expand this film universe. Thanks, guys. Love the show, and keep up the good work. Schnepp, let's start with you, man. Where can they go? Is it a good idea to expand a Spider-Man cinematic universe for Sony?
Maybe in 5 or 6 years, I think. Like once they've run through these 4 Spider-Man movies, if they wanted to, after that, they could bust off and do Spider-Man 2099, or I mean the futuristic Spider-Man. I think it was 2029, or I can't remember what the future Spider-Man was flying around and stuff. Venom, I know they're going to try to do it. It's inevitable that they'll do a Venom movie. I don't know. I don't really see that. That would be kind of like a weird spin would be Doc Ock taking over Spider-Man like they did in the comic book and just doing a crazy spin-off called the Superior Spider-Man. But that's not going to happen. That's too nerdy. So I don't know. I don't think the cinematic Spider-Man universe is going to expand because it's Spider-Man and then all of his villains, and that's what Sony has. They have a couple of characters that could maybe spin out, and Black Cat could be like the Catwoman of Spider-Man's universe, but I don't see that happening.
I do see it happening, and here's why I could see it. Because Spider-Man has proven for Sony over and over and over again with 4 films, it is bank. It is absolute bank, and idiots like me love them. Aside from Spider-Man 3, which was trash. But here's the thing with Sony. Sony is sitting in its little house and looking over across the fence at Disney's house, and they see Marvel now cranking out 2 of their cinematic universes movies a year. Yep. A year. While Sony's cranking out 1 every 3 years. So you can absolutely guarantee the brain trust at Sony is sitting around thinking, how can we take the intellectual properties that we have, Black Cat, Venom, Kraven, maybe, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things that we can use in the film and then maybe spin out so we can start making maybe 1 movie a year instead of 1 movie every 3 years and be in production on several of these things because we want to cash in on this too and we think the fan base wants it. I mean, there's a way to go with like a dark hero Venom. I think there's a way to go with that to give him his spin-off. There's definitely an audience for Black Cat. I think you can do that if you spin it off of Spider-Man properly and integrate it with Spider-Man properly. I think there's a way to do that, to have a cohesive cinematic universe for Sony. Obviously, Marvel has a bigger advantage. They have far more of their characters on the roster. Even Fox has far more characters on the roster. But I do believe there are some good characters in that Spider-Man universe that Sony has the rights to, that they can do it. And instead of making one movie every 3 years, I mean, they're never going to get to 2 movies a year like Marvel. But I think 1 movie a year in a Spider-Man shared cinematic universe, I think it's possible, and I think it's something they'd really like to do.
Well, I would say this: just do one Spider-Man movie every year. Problem solved. I don't see why they have to make a Spider-Man movie and 3 years later a 90-minute Spider-Man movie. How about up it? Make 1 movie a year. Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's real simple. Then you get to use all those characters and actually have an ongoing type of closer together soap opera, and then you can have 9 episodes in 9 years instead of 3. So I don't know. That's what I'd like.
That's a tall order, though, dude. That's a tall
I'm just saying.
order.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the final question of the day, and the final question today is reserved the honor for Sal Dinoto, who writes, "Greetings and salutations, AMC Movie Talk crew. I hope you're all doing well, and we hope you're doing well, Sal. I was wondering if Marvel/Disney could use the term adamantium. If they can, do you think Ultron's body will be made of adamantium?" Now, great question, Sal. And for those of you who don't know what Sal is asking about, adamantium in the Marvel Universe is like the ultimate indestructible material. It's what coats the bones of Wolverine and what his claws are made out of, so they can't be broken. Unless you're Wolverine 3 and they can be broken by other adamantium blades, which I guess that makes sense. So adamantium is supposed to be like this indestructible metal, which is why Wolverine, on top of his healing factor, is pretty much invincible and invulnerable to just about anything. So the question is, now, in Age of Ultron and in the Avengers comic book universe, Ultron actually remakes himself to be made completely out of adamantium, which obviously makes him a big problem. It makes him a significant problem for the Avengers. Yeah. Now, what Sal is asking is, since adamantium is a core component of the Fox X-Men universe in movies, can Marvel use it? To my understanding, no, they can't. They're not allowed to use the term adamantium. So, what I am guessing, and I'd like to see what Schnepp thinks about this. So, Schnepp, what my guess is, in the Marvel movie universe, they also have what's supposed to be a really, really tough metal known as vibranium, which is a part of, which brings us a little bit into Black Panther's world, actually. Right. For the movie universe, it's what they made Captain America's shield out of. I'm going to bet that when Tony Stark builds Ultron, I'm going to go out on a limb and bet that he builds them out of vibranium, which will be their secondary, metal compared to adamantium. But they can't use adamantium. Schnepp, how do you think it's going to work out?
Yeah, you read my mind. I was going to say vibranium because they've already mentioned it in Captain America. The shield's made out of vibranium. They've shown in Avengers a Wakanda screen when you had all those screens up. So they're introducing the idea of vibranium and Wakanda already in the Marvel Universe. So Ultron's outfit, if they do go to,
And for those of you who don't know what Schnepp's talking about, Wakanda is the country, the fictional country that Black Panther comes from and he's the prince of.
Yeah, so, they definitely, if they're going to mention a precious metal that Marvel owns, then it's going to be vibranium. It's not going to be adamantium because that's owned by Fox. So,
all right, and that'll do it for us today. Hey, folks, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate the fact we know you got a lot of millions and millions of YouTube channels you can watch on your days off to fill your time and spend your time with and be entertained by. We're really, really grateful that you've chosen to spend today with us. I want to thank, as always, of course, the director of the upcoming film, The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, Mr. John Schnepp. Schnepp, where can people find you online?
Just John Schnepp at Twitter and John Schnepp on Instagram. I'm just right there. You can hang out with me. Check out what I'm doing.
And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just at John Campia. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Keep following us every day. Make sure you jump in the comments section. Leave your thoughts, agreeing or disagreeing, or correcting us, because sometimes we're wrong, and we need you to correct us. And correct for everybody else who's reading in the comment section. Jump on down there and leave your thoughts. We'd love to see what you have to say. So, my name's John.